Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to another great day of learning. We're your teachers today. I'm Miss Amanda.
And I'm Miss Norman. We're so glad to be with you today for tons of great reading and learning.
Now, we have some learning goals today. We will describe how organisms in an ecosystem depend on each other and their environment, and even we're going to create a food chain. Now, our focus standards today are RI.3.3 and 3.7 and L.3.4.
Great plans. We have a few words we want to share with you today to help us meet our learning goals. Our first word is canopy. Canopy is a cover in a forest formed by the leafy upper branches of trees.
Right. I could say the spider monkey jumped from limb to limb across the great canopy of the rainforest. You may also hear the word canopies used as a variation or a different form of the word.
Scholars, let's work with Miss Amanda to decode her word.
Let's say the sounds. D, I, v, s. D, I, v, ers. When we blend it together, the word is, there you go, diverse. Diverse describes different forms of a certain thing. For example, when Dion went snorkeling, he was amazed at all the diverse fish he saw swimming around. This next group of words says energy pyramid. That's a model that shows the amount of available energy in each trophic level of an ecosystem. We may call it a trophic pyramid. We could also use energy pyramids as a variation. Miss Norman's going to put the word with its definition, and I'll show you the motion. Energy pyramid.
Now we have tier. Tier is a noun. It's one level of several levels. For example, Parker decorated the first tier of the wedding cake with her favorite flower, lavender. We could also make tier plural by saying tiers.
Our final word is wetlands. It's a compound word and it's a noun. A wetland is a low-lying area of land that has wet, spongy soil, such as a marsh or swamp or bog. The Everglades in South Florida form a vast wetland ecosystem that has a great variety of animal and plant life. More than one wetland would be plural. Wetlands. While Miss Norman puts the word up, I'll show you the motion. Wetlands.
Wow, look at our new vocabulary words. You'll hear some of those soon when our ecologist friend Zeke shares his informational text with us.
Absolutely. Now, scholars, think back to what we've already learned together. We've learned that an ecosystem is a community of living organisms, including plants and animals, all interacting with one another and their physical environments.
We also learned that a habitat is a home with an ecosystem. We've also learned that about trophic levels. Those are connecting steps in food chain. At least 2 trophic levels exist in a food chain.
Now, take a look at this image. Tell us what you see.
Great observation. You see a berry bush, worm, a snail, a wolf, a mouse, and a boar. There's also a beetle.
To help us recall how this cycle works, let's sort these living things into 3 categories. We'll sort them into producers, consumers, and decomposers.
Let's start with producers. Which organisms would be classified as a producer?
Exactly, the berry bush. That's a producer because it creates its own food. Let's keep going. Any other producers? All right, let's move to consumers.
Which organisms do you place under the consumer? Nice work. We would classify and categorize the wolf, the boar, and the mouse as consumers. Any more?
Okay, then we're ready to move on to the category of decomposers. Which are decomposers? Of course, the earthworms, snail, and beetle. What's their role? Yes, to break down the dead plants and animals.
We have just organized these plants and animals in a way to help us understand their role in nature.
Friends, today you'll be looking at different ways that we can organize information about feeding relationships in nature. So let's listen carefully to learn more about food chains, food webs, and energy pyramids.
Well, boys and girls, did anyone find examples of food chains in your own habitat or ecosystem? Think about what you ate for dinner last night. Where did the food that gave you energy get its energy from? Where do you belong in the food chain? Remember that ecosystems include all living things, living and non-living things in a particular community. All parts are interconnected. All living things in an ecosystem are essential and depend upon one another. And all non-living things, the soil, climate, the amount of rainfall that an ecosystem receives, help determine what lives there. Today we're going to look at the food chain and food web to see what they tell us about the eating relationships among different animals in different ecosystems. First, I want to explain an energy pyramid to you because I think it's a good way to view the trophic levels in a food chain.
You already know that food chains cycle energy and nutrients through an ecosystem from one organism to another and back to the soil again. You know that food chains have different trophic levels. Now think of these levels arranged in a pyramid. The bottom tier of the pyramid consists of plants. Notice that this trophic level you see here is the widest, showing that plants have the most energy available for the major plant activity of life, growth. You know that green plants, the producers, get their energy from the sun. Herbivores, plant consumers, make up the second tier or trophic level. Notice that the second tier of the pyramid is narrower than the bottom level of producers. That's because there are fewer organisms and less energy at this level. Most herbivores have to work very hard to get all food energy that they need from plants. Moving about, staying warm, and reproduction, their activities of life, use up a lot of energy. Plus, less energy is stored in their bodies compared to the energy stored in plants.
By the time carnivores enter the food chain at the third tier or trophic level, there's even less food energy available. Carnivores use a lot of energy for physical movement. Because there's less energy available and consumers use so much of it, the third tier of the pyramid is the smallest. This represents the least amount of energy of all levels of the pyramid. The energy pyramid shows how much energy flows from one organism to another in a food chain. Because energy is lost as it's passed along the food chain, there are usually fewer animals at the top of the pyramid. Those at the top of the pyramid may have to travel over large areas within an ecosystem to find enough energy to survive. Think about that as we explore a variety of ecosystems. Let's take a look at the eating relationships and how energy is passed along in several different ecosystems.
First, we'll travel to the Sonoran Desert in the southwestern part of the United States to visit a desert ecosystem. Even though the Sonoran Desert is one of the largest and hottest deserts in the Americas, it has more plant and animal species than any other desert in the world. Each one of these species has its own habitat within the ecosystem. But we'll look at the ecosystem as a whole. What do you see in this image? Ah, yes, an energy pyramid. The main producers in this ecosystem are shrubs and cacti. The plant consumers, both herbivores and omnivores, include ground squirrels, rabbits, kangaroo rats, mice, lizards, desert tortoises, and birds. Carnivores include kit foxes, elf owls, red-tailed hawks, roadrunners, scorpions, coyotes, badgers, raccoons, skunks, and rattlesnakes. Though they do not live in the driest parts of the desert, mountain lions often come down from the surrounding mountain areas to hunt. Where they exist, mountain lions are at the top of the food chain. Vultures and beetles are some of the scavengers of the desert. Remains left to rot by the scavengers become food for the decomposers, mushrooms, insects, and microorganisms. With so much diverse plant and animal life, there are many food chains in the Sonoran Desert. Let's look at two simple examples.
Ants eat desert plants. Next, the scorpion eats the ant. Then the rat eats the scorpion. Then the hawk eats the rats. Finally, beetles and fungi break down the hawk when it dies, returning nutrients to plants' deserts. Next, ants eat the desert plants. The scorpion eats the ant. Then the bird eats the scorpion. Then the fox eats the bird. Finally, beetles and fungi break down the fox when it dies, returning nutrients to desert plants. Remember that decomposers like this beetle and fungi play an important role in the food chain. They break down dead animals and plants into nutrients, and those nutrients are released back into the soil. Do you see any connection between these food chains? Both food chains begin with ants eating on plants. In both chains, a scorpion eats an ant. When food chains connect, as they surely do, food webs are created. Here is one possible desert food web, what one possible desert food web may look like.
The kangaroo rat eats desert plants. Next, the snake eats the kangaroo rat. Then the coyote eats the snake. Or maybe the lizard eats desert plants. Next, the snake eats the lizard. Then the roadrunner eats the snake. Then the hawk eats the roadrunner. How about this one? The tortoise eats desert plants. Then the fox eats the tortoise. The lizard eats the desert plants. Then the hawk eats the lizard. Maybe the lizard will eat the plants. Next, the roadrunner eats the lizard. Then the bobcat eats the roadrunner. The ant eats desert plants. Next, the scorpion could eat the ant. Then the bird eats the scorpion. Then the fox eats the bird. Finally, the scavengers and decomposers eat the dead coyote, hawk, tortoise, roadrunner, etc., returning those nutrients to the soil. Can you identify the producers in each link? The producers are the desert plants with their seeds, nectar, and fruit. What about those consumers? Which animal is a scavenger? Who are the decomposers? Well, those are the beetles and the termites, and they are also the bacteria and the fungi that produce carbon dioxide and water, returning nutrients to the ground to nourish the producers.
Let's move to the dry desert, to a very different ecosystem, one that is formed from being dry. Can you guess which ecosystem I'm thinking about? Good guess. Well, let's take a peek at the Florida Everglades, the biggest freshwater marsh in North America. What do you see in this image? Yes, an energy pyramid. Low-lying aquatic plants are the producers in this giant wetland ecosystem. What consumer do you think live in the marsh? In other words, who eats the reeds, cattails, and water lilies that live there? Representatives from each of the 5 groups of vertebrate animals live here. Amphibians, mammals, birds, fish, and reptiles all live in the marshlands. We'll take a look at some of those hungry eaters and consumers that consume water plants, see who then feasts on them. Here are some examples of food chains in the wetlands. Tadpoles eat plants. Next, turtle eats tadpoles. Then, the alligator eats the turtle. Finally, the decomposers break down the alligator, returning nutrients to the soil for producers. Or maybe, the grasshopper eats the plants. Next, the frog eats the grasshoppers. Then, the alligator eats the frog. Finally, decomposers break down the alligator, returning nutrients to the soil for new producers. Just as there are many food webs in the deserts, there are also many food webs in the marsh. Remember, the plant producers are at the bottom of the food chain, of the food web. Not all the consumers eat the plants, but the webs of connection always return to the producer. A food web in the marsh might look something like this.
Now we see that the tadpoles eat plants. Next, the turtle eats the tadpoles. Then the alligator eats the turtle. Or perhaps the grasshopper eats plants. The frog eats the grasshopper, and then the alligator eats the frog. Or maybe the grasshopper eats plants. Next, the frog eats the grasshopper, but then the raccoon eats the frog. The grasshopper could eat the plants. Then the crayfish could eat the grasshopper. Then the snake could eat the crayfish. And then that raccoon could eat the snake. Now, insects could also eat the plants. Next, the fish could eat the insects. Then the egret eats the fish. And then the alligator eats the egret. Finally, bacteria, earthworms, insects, and other decomposers eat the animals and plants when they die and return nutrients to the soil for new producers.
Before I leave you today, we'll look at one more ecosystem. This one lies along the equator in South America. Who can make an educated guess as to what ecosystem supplies energies for monkeys and jaguars? Yes, the Amazon rainforest. You can see the thick canopy or layer of top branches of trees that cover the rainforest and provide homes for many animals. What do you see in this image? Yes, an energy pyramid. I've already named a few of the animals in the Amazon rainforest. Look at the pyramid with all the different plants and animals. How many producers, consumers, and decomposers can you identify? Remember that an ecosystem's diversity of plant and animal life is what makes it strong. On the bottom row, you can see the producers: trees, trunk, banana plant, orchards, and grasses. On the next two rows, there are consumers: tapir, frog, monkey, capybara, toucan, crocodile, hawk, and eagle. At the top of the energy pyramid is the jaguar. On the sides, there are decomposers, bacteria, earthworm, fungi, termite, and beetle. Where do the plants at the bottom of the chart get their energy? Yes, the producers in the trophic level get their energy from the sun. And who might eat the plants? Yes, the capybara or ant. And who might get energy from dining on the capybara or the ant? Yes, possibly the baby crocodile or a frog. Who then may eat the baby crocodile or frog? Maybe a snake or an ocelot. Then the bodies of the snake and ocelot become food for the decomposer.
Look at all these plants and animals in the Amazon rainforest. How many different combinations can you find to make a food web? The monkey could eat the berries, and then the jaguar eats the monkey. Or maybe the monkey eats the berries, next the baby crocodile eats the monkey. Then the snake could eat the baby crocodile. How about if the monkey eats the berries, then the hawk eats the monkey? Or the ants could eat the plants, and then the frog could eat the ant. Then the ocelot eats the frog. Then the snake eats the ocelot. The capybara could eat the plant, then the jaguar could eat the capybara. The capybara eats the plants, then the hawk could eat the capybara. And then finally, decomposers eat the remains of the dead animals and then return the nutrients to the soil for new producers. Every ecosystem in the world is made up of interconnected living things that are dependent upon one another for survival. The ongoing, regular completion of this energy cycle in food chains determines an ecosystem's ability to survive. The next time we're together, we'll look at ways in which ecosystems change over time. Until then, enjoy your own habitat and your consumer friends. I'll see you later. So, scholars, during our reading, Zeke shared several food chains with us. One of those food chains was an Everglades food chain.
Here we have the name of some of the producers, consumers, and decomposers of the Everglades food chain. You have learned about this food chain, so let's work together to correctly order the Everglades food chain.
So let's start with which part first? Ah, yes, the plants. Let's place them here.
What should come next, friends? I concur. The tadpoles. The tadpoles eat the plants. Now, what consumes the tadpole?
There you go. The turtle.
Now, which consumer would come next? True, the alligator. Eventually, the alligator will perish or die. What happens next? You knew it. Consumers like ants and worms break down the alligators after it perishes and then returns nutrients back to the soil of the earth. This prepares the soil for new plants and
it completes the food chain. Outstanding. Now, just a few questions to check for your understanding. Which part of this food chain are the consumers? Ah, great thinking. The alligator, the turtle, and even the tadpole. How about the producers? Which part are the producers? You've got it, those plants. Now finally, the decomposers. There you go. Ecologists, you've done it again. The ants and the worms are the decomposers.
amazing scholars, you have helped us create our very own food chain today.
Scholars, we have enjoyed learning about food chains, food webs, and food pyramids with all of you. Now, be sure to join us again soon when we continue our exploration of our great and wonderful world.
Absolutely. Join us again as soon as we continue to learn about all kinds of animals, places, and events in our world. Thank you for doing your best today, scholars. Be sure to share something you learned today with someone in your home.
Definitely. All rights and credits for today's lesson belong to Core Knowledge Language Arts. We'd like to thank them for publicly sharing these valuable resources. The views and opinions expressed in this lesson are those of the Core Knowledge authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Mississippi Department of Education. Friends, thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.